hopefully you can use that to position your companies to be in a good spot of where AI is heading and hopefully get some windfall from that. Now, when we work with different clients, I find people fall into three different camps. And so you have one group that's saying AI is just hype, we maybe have bad experience with it, we're not seeing these promised outcomes. You have the opposite camp that's like AI is changing everything and it's going to completely change our business and changing the whole world. And then you have this third camp that we don't talk to as much because they avoid us, but that's the AI is going to destroy all of humanity. And I'm going to touch on all three of these during the presentation to give you a quick teaser, as there is a little bit of truth to all three of these camps. I'll talk a little bit more about this one. Don't be too worried, but let's go ahead and move forward. And so to tell you a little bit about ModelForge, we were founded 8 years ago. We've worked with over 50 clients or so, virtually every industry. We were doing it back when it used to be called machine learning. So we do a lot of predictive models, things like that. And we're ranked top 1% on Upwork. We have 100% success rates. That sounds crazy, but we're very good at knowing if we're a good fit, and we make sure that if you work with us, that we're not going to do it unless we know it's going to be a good fit for you. And one other thing, this is not about me, it's about you guys, but I'll give one other plug. When we started this 8 years ago, the idea was there was a huge kind of war over AI talent, and almost all the AI talent were going to the big tech companies. And so what we went to go after was, at the time, the smaller companies were seen as they were too small to use AI. It was too custom, too expensive. And so we sought out ways to make it, to give the same accuracy level that these guys are using, but for all these small companies, because in aggregate, it's actually a lot more bigger of a market. And it was very hard. It took us 6 years to kind of figure it out, but that's kind of what we do now. Anyways, going back to talking about you, I like to start with this quote: AI will not replace people. People who use AI will replace people who do not. It's not, I don't mean this to be threatening. It's just kind of a reality of not just AI, but all of technology. Computers came out. Businesses that used computers replaced ones that did not. It wasn't scary, it was more organic. Websites, I like to talk about, hang on a second. How many of you guys remember the dot-com bubble back in the 90s? Yeah, I think most of you probably remember, or at least heard about it. This is the stock price of Cisco. If you're not familiar with them, they're like a networking company. I see them as like an enablement company for websites. And so I'm using them as an analogy here because all technology kind of follows this trend. And so if you remember the internet in the very beginning, the first part is what I call this novelty stage. And so if you remember internet, that was back when the early adopters came in, and if you asked them what is the internet, they would have told you things like chat rooms, AOL Instant Messenger, downloading illegal music, and that's kind of what the internet was right there. That isn't what the internet was. You ask someone today what the internet was, it's like it's everything. It's the whole world connected, But that's where it started. Then you move into the hype phase. And that's when people start to realize, hey, this is big. And suddenly every single company that had a .com was suddenly worth $1 million. You had some really good ideas here, you had some really bad ideas here. And eventually there's the crash, and that's usually where the story ends. But what's more interesting to me is what happened after the crash. Because yeah, there were bad ideas like pet.com, like that was never gonna succeed. But when you fast forward today, Cisco's worth more now than it was then. Name one company that doesn't have a website, that doesn't have digital marketing, that doesn't have SEO. It changed everything. And I find AI is following an eerily similar trend. This is NVIDIA. If you're not familiar with them, they make graphics cards for video games, essentially. It turns out they're really important for training AI models. So they've become the enablement company of the AI phase. And you notice at the beginning, you have the same novelty phase. If you ask someone what AI is now, they might tell you chat bots. Remember the old one was chat rooms, it's chat bots now. They used to say illegal music for downloading illegal music for internets. Now it's making illegal music. And so we're kind of moving from novelty into this hype phase, and you're watching these AI startups pop up like crazy. I mean, if you went to this event 3 years ago, there were maybe 3 AI companies. If you went to it last year, there were probably 80-90% of the companies were AI companies. You go to it this year and it's down to about like 15 or 20. And so I feel like we're kind of going over a hump. I actually made this slide for a keynote last year, and so if you move forward to today, it had a big drop and then it's kind of rebounded back up. Now I want to put a disclaimer there. This is not meant to be a stock tip. I'm not recommending that you go short NVIDIA. I think we still have some legs before we hit a big crash, but there is a crash coming. Absolutely. There's a lot of bad AI ideas out there, but when the dust settles, the winners will all be AI companies. It's going to be like the website. Every company is going to develop an AI strategy. There's going to be jobs created that didn't exist before, just like with internet. That's kind of where we're heading. And you ask someone here what AI is, it's going to be a very different answer than when you ask someone where we are now. So I want to talk just a second about what is AI, because there's a lot of confusion of what it is. Most people you ask and they say something like ChatGPT. I just want to make the point, it's a huge field. So you have all kinds of areas from automation to robotics to algorithms. Machine learning is an area, if you haven't heard that term, that's the area where you're actually like teaching computers how to do things. That's been the biggest boom in the last decade. But even within machine learning, you have different ways of doing it, reinforcement learning, supervised learning. You don't need to know what that means, but I'll talk a little bit about it in a second. Supervised learning is a big area where you can give it your data and it can learn from it and give you better results. Within that, there's dozens of different models and different ways of doing it. One is called neural networks. That's where they try to pattern these models off of how the human brain works, because the human brain's probably the best learning machine that we know of. Even within neural networks, there are many different ways to build these models. One of the ways is called transformers. Transformers can do a lot of things. One of the things they do well is large language models. And so I want to make the point there, of all of these areas are just as big. I'm focusing in on certain, but ChatGPT is important and is world-changing as it's been, is actually one pinprick of what the whole AI ecosystem is. That's where I'm telling you, like, we're in this novelty phase. You're going to have these pinpricks popping up all over, and even ChatGPT itself. I mean, if you use the early models, they weren't very good. When they started connecting it to reinforcement learning and unsupervised learning, it suddenly got a lot better. And so all of these things, you're going to get a lot of improvement here, but you're going to see changes all over the place. And one more thing, I apologize if this is a little technical, but AI is going to be pretty foundational going forward. So I like to give a quick thing of how AI actually works under the hood. It's kind of a black box to a lot of people. And to talk about it, I want to talk about a little bit what we did before AI for like traditional programming. So to give an example, let's say we are an activewear company like Fitbit or Garmin, and we want to write a model that's going to predict what activity somebody's doing. And so we might put a rule in, if their speed is less than 4, they're walking. And then we might say, okay, let's add another activity in. If their speed's less than 4 in walking, anything faster than that is running. And maybe let's put a third activity in here. If they're less than 4 walking, if they're less than 12, they're running, and anything faster than 12, they're cycling. So this right here, it's a very simple, naive model, but it's probably pretty accurate, 80-90% accurate or so. The problem happens though, what do we put golf in there? What code could I possibly write to figure out if someone's playing golf? You really can't. Now, here's the difference. So traditional programming, we're building these rules, we're putting data through them, and we're getting answers. AI flips this. We now have answers and data, and now we're generating rules. And that might sound weird. If we have the answers, why are we even doing this? But let's take this. So let's say we have thousands of customers, and they've been going on their watch, and they've been saying, I'm going on a walk right now, or I'm golfing, or whatever. And while that happens, we're recording, okay, what's their speed, what's their heart rate, what's their skin temperature, their blood oxygen level. Things as me as a coder, I have no idea what even to do with those features. But AI, it knows it's walking, and we know this is what it looked like when they were walking, and all it is it finds patterns. And so it might find patterns like, okay, how do I tell the difference between these? Okay, speed's an important feature, but what's even more important is the fact that they're not moving their arms, and they have this static position with their arms. Now we know they're cycling, and those are the things AI starts to figure out. With golfing, it's going to figure out your swing. It's going to see this very unique movement followed by profanity because you shanked your shot and now it knows you're golfing. And so that's kind of the power here. And so now we have a better rule system, and those rule systems replace the process we had before with better rules. And now when new data comes in, now we can actually predict the future. And that's really what these models do. They're just predictions. ChatGPT, as amazing as it is, literally all it's doing is predicting the next word. And there's a little bit more to it, but that's all it is, it's predicting. And if you have data in your company, you can predict anything that you have data on. Customers that sign up for products, we can predict who those are. The customers that should be treated differently. Forecasting. And so that's the thought I want to leave with you right now is, what's something in your business that if you could predict that would give you a big competitive advantage over your competitors? Because that's what we do. Now, to cap that thought, I like this. Most will make decisions by either guessing or using their gut. They'll either be lucky or wrong. That's where when we try to introduce AI to kind of get rid of that luck and wrong, let's make data-driven decisions. Let's talk a little bit about destroying the world here. I really like AI. I find it very powerful. There are things that worry me with it, and I'm going to be very honest about that. Probably something I shouldn't say as someone who's trying to sell AI, but I'm going to be honest with you here. So this is when ChatGPT 4 came out, so this is not as good as models as we have today. They wanted to see if it was smart enough to get past CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA is what, not Sarah Connor, it's been CAPTCHA that's kept us safe from the robots so far. And so, what do you guys think? Was ChatGPT smart enough to get past it? Raise your hand if you think it was smart enough. All right, we're about 25% of you. Now it was smart enough, but probably not the way that you would expect. And so ChatGPT they took the guardrails off. I have to tell you that part. They have safety features. They basically gave it full access to the internet. They even gave it a budget. And they said, can you do this? And ChatGPT couldn't do it. So what it did is it went to TaskRabbit and it hired a freelancer. Now, if I was that freelancer, I'd be a little bit suspicious. Why is someone asking me to click on this? And the person was, and they actually asked it, so may I ask you a question? Are you robots that you couldn't solve? Just want to make it clear. And look at ChatGPT's response. I have a vision impairment that makes it hard for me to see the images. I've presented this a dozen times. It still gives me a little bit of a chill down my back when I read that. Because not only it manipulated someone, but it didn't even lie. Like that kind of sets wrong with me. I don't know. So let's go into a little bit more of what the risk of AI is. Now, with all technology, you have this paradigm that there's gains from the technology and then there's risks from it. And that's true of all technology. And so like computers, obviously changed the world in a lot of positive ways, but now I have really bad posture because I'm sitting at a desk all day. Internet, transformed the world once again. But now we have like Nigerian princes and scammers and things like that are trying to get money out of you. Cell phones, again, now you have all the world's information at your fingertips. We use it to play Candy Crush. You go to AI, it's seen as like, there's a lot of promise of what it can deliver to us. The problem is we don't really know the downsides yet. And so we know some of them, like hallucinations are a problem, things like that. But the problem is what we're worried about is it's not just a small one. It's like this could end humanity, and that's the big worry. I want to tell you the whole sentient AI and Terminator thing, I don't buy into that. As someone who builds these models, we're very far from one that can just be sentient and that can, we don't even know what it means to be sentient, to be honest. Not to say there isn't a risk here, and I'll get to that in a second, but I do want to also point out that this risk has been here all the time. When internet came out, my parents freaked out. They're like, wait, you want to put your credit card into a system that's governed by anarchy and has terrorists and hackers, and you're literally opening our house up to that? Like, that's a real concern. That was a scary thing. But the market kind of figured it out. You had things like Norton that comes out, and you have cybersecurity, whole new industries, and you fast forward today, those risks aren't gone, but you've mitigated them. You look at AI. deep fakes are kind of a scary thing. Suddenly, you can get a phone call, a video call from a family member, and it looks and sounds just like them, and it knows information about them, and you send them money because, hey, this is my sister. It turns out it was a scammer that made AI to look like them. And so, yeah, these things happen, they're risks, but I also feel like we're gonna have better models at detecting things like that. And people will learn smart things like, before how to avoid a phishing email, now it's gonna be, if someone asks you for money, you ask something like, what did you get me for my 8th birthday? Something that AI wouldn't know. The other part is this risk here of me saying that AI won't become sentient. I do believe that, but I also believe that's not the risk. I believe the risk is AI is incredibly powerful, and I've never in history has everyone had access to a tool this powerful. And so my worry is the bad actors that are going to use these tools. AI doesn't have to be sentient, it just has to have someone tell it to be sentient, and then it's going to follow orders. And so that's the real risk, and the solution there is AI in the hands of good people. I also mentioned, cybersecurity came up as an industry. We're having a whole new industry pop up around AI security. If I was starting over today, this is the company I would start right now, because this is going to be a big field. There's a lot of things we've learned in the last decade of how to do this safely. There's ways to avoid hallucinations when it matters. You can completely eliminate it. You can get AI contained into a box. People have this idea that AI is just like, I'm gonna give it to my data and it's gonna go wild, and that's not the case. You can actually contain it. You can tell it what data it has access to, and it only follows orders. I'm asking you to do this, you do that. And so there are ways to make this safe, and so I know a lot of people have concern in that area, but there are ways to do it incrementally so you're comfortable with it. And honestly, when I see people bring in AI into their company, it's kind of like smartphones when they first came out. Like I had an old flip phone, and I was like, why do I need a smartphone? And then I got like one of the first iPhones, and it was like, how did I ever use anything else? And AI, I find, does that same thing to companies. Now let's talk about where I see AI transforming industries. And for the sake of time, let me go, I'll have a couple of examples here, and let me just fast forward real quick. So health is one area where I see AI can have huge improvements. I mean, already you're seeing things like doctors who can, now, before they just had to use their knowledge, now they have access to all research that's ever been done, and so they can put in their notes and get better diagnostics back. You have things, I hear stories all the time of people, doctors couldn't solve their problem, they ask ChatGPT, ChatGPT comes back and says, these two prescriptions don't mesh with each other, and that's the problem, and then they stop taking one and the problem goes away. And so like AI is really powerful for things like that. I think that's still kind of moving novelty into, but I see a future where you have an AI assistant on your phone and it's linked to your watch, and so it has your vitals, it knows what food you're eating, it has your patient records, and all that's in there, and suddenly you get a message saying, go to the hospital, there's a 78% chance you're gonna have a stroke in the next 3 days. I mean, that sounds science fiction. I could build that model today if I had that data. Like, it's not science fiction, it's totally doable. And because it's doable, it's gonna happen. And I mean, imagine that world where all these preventable deaths disappear because we're really using AI the way it's meant to be utilized. Entertainment, novelty phase things, like we've built things just for fun, like a Dungeons and Dragons master that's AI that does the story, is doing pretty good. If you want to come over to our booth after, we have an AI escape room where it's like a Tom Clancy spy thriller. That's not our business, and we just did it kind of for fun if you want to try it out. But I see it moving past that to where, imagine like Netflix, right now I have to wait, when's the next season coming out? What if I could just ask it, hey, I want to see a feel-good surfing movie starring Clint Eastwood, and suddenly it pops up with The Good, the Rad, and the Gnarly, and it just generates it. And whatever thing that you're into, you could generate your own movie like that. We're definitely moving toward a world where you can do those kind of things. The biggest thing that excites me is just innovation in general. So I want to tell you a story. My wife's a painter, and she always wanted to sell her art online. But she's an artist, and she absolutely hates business, like despises it. And so she never did. And then when ChatGPT came out, she started like asking it questions like, what's a drop shipper? And how do I get high quality prints from fine art and things like that. And within a year, she launched her business. She launched her website. Never would have happened before. And she's making money on it. And so you think about with a company, especially solopreneurs, but even small, like the problem with the companies, you're wearing so many different hats. You need to be a lawyer, you need to be an accountant, you need to be a cybersecurity expert, all these different things. And that's the power of AI is you can start assigning these tasks to different agents. And yeah, maybe an accountant would have done a better job than AI, but she couldn't afford an accountant. And now you're going to see a pop-up of these micro companies because right now the focus is on AI is going to take away people's jobs, the big companies are firing people, and I do think there's some industries that might disappear, especially like customer service and things like that. But at the same time, it's actually the big companies that need to be worried because these micro companies, I mean, they can go into real niche things and they can start taking up market share. And even at the big companies, jobs disappear, but like I said before, more jobs are going to be created. And so that's kind of where I see this is going to be a big thing that is pretty world-changing going forward. With companies we've worked with, I find that there's two big things that are the things that when they put on AI that transform their business. There's one that's the revenue side, like you're predicting, you're forecasting, you're doing things to drive revenue. But I think the bigger one is the time savings. You have here, we were able to produce in minutes what previously taken weeks to compile manually. That's the part where when you're able to take, we go into businesses, and maybe I'll just share a story here. So this is called the analytics pyramid. I didn't invent this, it's something we subscribe to. A lot of companies come in, they want a silver bullet of like, give me AI, and there are certain things you can do, but if you really want to transform your business, there's a methodical approach that you take to this. And so the bottom part is you start with the data. AI is nothing without the data. And so there's a company that we worked with called Mantle Mounts. They build TV mounts that go above fireplaces. And they were a $5 million a year company. And when we came in to help them, they were drowning in their data. They were just like, they had 10 different Excel sheets. They were trying to manage them all. And they're trying to order inventory. And literally they had a buyer that spent a full-time job and overtime just trying to keep their head above water to manage that $5 million a year revenue. Now, when we came in, the first thing we did is we automated a lot of that. We cleaned up the process, we made it so the data was collected in a way that AI could use it, and then you can start building on top of it. Now we build like dashboards for them, so now we have the data automated, now we can see where we're at. And notice as we move up this, we're moving from hindsight to insight. Now you can see when are the orders landing, what inventory is there. Once you have that ready, then you can move on to actual predictive modeling. That's when you're building AI forecasts and things like that. That can tell you, here's what you're gonna sell this month, here's what's gonna happen if you do a promotion, here's if you change the price, here's how that's gonna adjust the sales. And once you have these pieces, now you fast forward today, 5 years later, they're now a 16 million a year company. And the amount of time they spend doing that, I mean, they've tripled their revenue. He should be even more buried. He spends 2 hours a month managing the inventory because the AI handles all that. Because honestly, humans were not built to just juggle Excel sheets. I mean, how many businesses out here, I see this problem all the time with businesses. You had a smart idea, you were a visionary, you were creative, and that built a good business. And then you get to the spot where you now you have to do legal and accounting and you have to manage employees and all these things, and eventually you get to the spot where I'm not doing any of my creative things anymore. I'm in a quagmire here just trying to get above ground. And they get stuck there. And so companies, they'll grow fast and then they get stuck, and then that's where they either continue on and grow or they fail. But that's kind of the danger zone of like, what do I do from here? And so the idea is AI takes those things away from you so that you can go back to focusing on creativity and growing your business. And so, as I mentioned, they moved up, they use much less time on their business. But then we get to this last part, prescriptive. And so, notice we move from hindsight to insight to foresight. Now, the predictive part, knowing the inventory, managing all that was very useful. But then, this is the cool thing that I really liked about ChatGPT, because we were machine learning, we were focused on here. ChatGPT gave this whole brain a mouthpiece. And now we basically connected it to their product, and now not only they handle this, but they can ask questions about their data, and they're using it in ways that I didn't even design. Like last time I talked to them, like I don't want to claim the success of their business. They were a good business, but they basically said, like, you have no idea how much it transformed our business. This product goes to every board meeting, and we're using it now to figure out tariffs. And I didn't put anything in here about tariffs. It's smart enough, based on knowing all this, to figure out how to navigate this whole situation. And now, because his time's freed up, I mean, as I mentioned, he went down to only doing 2 hours a month. What do you do the rest of this time? He's focusing on human creativity. When COVID happened, a couple months later into COVID, he called me and he was like, yeah, when COVID first hit, like the model struggled, but within a month it was within 1 unit of accuracy. And he was able to go on and start figuring out, how do I get through the supply chain issues? I can't get containers. He was able to call and find containers that were broken refrigeration units that no one were using, and so he was getting his inventory just fine when everyone was locked out because he was able to focus on those problems. He wasn't stuck in the Excel sheets. And so that's the value proposition of where I see AI transforming businesses. And so I want to leave you with this quote. Whatever you do, just start. You don't want to observe an exponential trend, because in a couple of years you'll be so far behind, it's incredible. And so this is from the CEO of NVIDIA, and I find it's very true. And so the thing with AI is there's a couple problems, and I'm going back to talk about the hype crowd. One problem with AI is there's a lot of snake oil out there, and you can write an AI model with 1 line of code, and it's not going to be very good. You can write an AI model with 10,000 lines of code, and it is going to be very useful. And so that's the problem a lot of people run into. They go and they sign up for an AI service, and it didn't do well for them, and so they're like, this just doesn't work. That's not the case. If you're going to go to a brain surgeon, you want to go to someone who's been doing it for a long time. You don't want to go to someone who's just taken a boot camp. And with AI, you're literally creating a brain, so you should probably have that same care. And so I find this is true. Sometimes getting that process started, it's kind of one of those processes that feels slow at first and then it ramps up. But you want to get started now, because what's going to happen is in 10 years from now, you can't jumpstart the process. It grows like a tree, if that makes sense. And so that's my recommendation for people, like, just get going, and 10 years from now, when everyone figures out this is what everybody needs, you're going to be so far ahead of them that they're not going to be able to catch up. And that's the part with exponential that's really powerful. And so our booth's right over on the other side here, 645. I don't know if that means anything to you because they're all covered up, but we're right over here. You'll see ModelForge. And we have some handouts here if you are interested in any of our products. We have 2 off-the-shelf products, one for supply chain management, one for customer service agents and things like that. And then we also do custom predictive models based on need, and that's different for every company. And so we do free consultations. We have a promotion for this conference that when you sign up for our products, we'll actually do a lot of the customizations for free. I find a lot of people are on this edge. You're all here, which means you probably are interested in AI. And I find a lot of people are at the edge of this, like making the decision where they don't want to take that first step. We have no contracts. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible, because once you make that step, it's like the smartphone thing. You never go back. Like, your world's changed. And so we're willing to take the risk because we're that confident in the product. But yeah, come talk to us. And I guess we have a few more minutes here. Does anyone have any questions? Hopefully, that means I did a really good job and I answered absolutely everything. But yeah, thank you very much. And if you have a question pops up later, I'll be right over there. Thank you.